the whole 6010.
Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football. Today's show is brought to you by Geico. Switch to Geico and see all the ways that you could save. My name is Daniel Dopp. I am joined by the Stefania Bell and Field Yates. Field, it's not that I don't want to start with you, but I haven't seen Stefania in a real long time, so I'm going to focus here. Stefania, how have your travels been?
Good. Look, I've got papers all around. I've got notes. I'm still getting oriented to like what it feels like to be in a studio, because when you're out at training camps, this is how you get ready in the morning. Hair goes in a ponytail. I throw on like shirts.
Multiple shirts.
Look, I can't even speak.
That's what it is.
This is what's happened to me because I've been out on the road. So I know you throw on like shorts or a skirt, something functional for 90-degree heat, tank top, tennis shoes. Very little effort.
Very little. Very little.
A couple of things to point out here. Many of the people that watch the live stream will note that it could be like 4 degrees in Bristol, Connecticut, and Stefania will still have a sleeveless T-shirt on because you got to show off the arms. And when you said I've got papers everywhere, was that in reference to all the money of your new contract? Is that what it was? Because one more time, now that she's here in person, we can shout out Stefania. Yeah, there we go. Come on, step right up.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm gainfully employed.
All right.
I like to say that Rico.
That's positive.
Rico will eat well for the
Lots
next
of treats
3
for
years.
Rico.
Lots of treats for
Aw, he
Rico, the good
deserves
boy,
it.
because he's been putting up with me being away.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has. We have
guy.
so much to get into for today's show.
Lot
We're
of
talking
news.
about double
Lot of
trouble. We got
football.
news. I got one more thing, though, I want to throw out there before we get into this. On Twitter the other day, we received a tweet from Ruth Ann Moreau, who was a listener of the podcast, and her and her family with their 2 daughters, 8 and 9-year-olds, were getting ready for their first fantasy football league. And their oldest daughter, I believe, Caitlin, was really excited to be able to draft Cooper Kupp. And I just want to say, Caitlin, if Cooper Kupp is who you're on, you have a bright future in this business. Make sure that you stay there. Also, I found out that Caitlin really likes the different hairstyles I do every day.
Oh, wow.
That's part of why she wants to watch the show. So, Caitlin, here's the thing. You let me know when you want to match hairstyles for one of these podcasts, and you and I can share the same hair for that day. All right? Maybe we'll get Stefania to join. Maybe Field will join us for a whole setup. But it's just so much fun to be able to hear from our listeners. I love hearing that there are families getting involved, that there are kids that listen to us, and it's so much fun. I just want to say thank you to everyone. This has been an awesome start to this year.
She's 8, right? So let me do a little bit of math here. Like maybe ESPN can just keep signing Stefania to extensions for another 15 years.
won't
You'd
do
be ready to
math.
retire in 15
At that
years,
time,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Let's not talk about math.
No, but I'm just saying.
Advancing years.
When she's 23, you're probably ready to retire. So this
I
could
might
work
be
out
40.
well. You could be.
Yeah, you might be 40 by the time she's 23.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the heir apparent.
Still be
The heir
working.
apparent. We taking over.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well,
That's right.
let's bring her in we'll bring her in
Say,
as
never
an
s-
understudy,
When
right?
she is
gotta
officially,
plan your succession.
she's the
That's
Trey
what you
Lance,
do.
so you're Jimmy
Yeah.
Garoppolo.
Oh, my gosh.
Hey,
Well,
whoa, Jimmy,
yikes.
that's ending well.
Hey.
He's
All
making
right.
$25 million a year. You're
Hey,
doing
you know
great.
what? Yeah, it could be worse than being Jimmy Garoppolo.
Hey, you look
That's
like $1
fair.
million at all time, and you're worth
That's true.
Okay.
$25 million at all
Take
times.
that. Also unemployed.
All right,
Okay.
let's talk.
He's got the Subway commercial.
Yeah,
though.
he's still doing okay. Let's get into the news here. Stefania, you obviously have been gone for a little bit out at training camps, getting so much information for us, but we just want to start with a couple of injury updates from you because you're so good at this. Michael Thomas, this is what it is. Like, you bring so much to our podcast that we can't do when you're not here, so I'm so excited when you're here.
I actually listen when I'm not here. You guys are doing a darn good job.
I appreciate that. Michael
but-
Thomas, though.
Debatable.
Let's talk about Michael Thomas. It's no secret that I've had my reservations about him coming back because of the history of the foot and the lack of football playing time, but he has looked very good in camp so far, except for the fact that now we're not seeing him because he has a hamstring injury. And I don't think this is a big deal. I think we've talked about this on the show before where some guys in the training camp period will have a hamstring issue. And is it a minor issue that they're trying to hold them back and just make sure nothing bigger happens before they start the season? Or is it something where they're really worried like this is potentially going to limit them into the season? I think with Michael Thomas, it's the former. And you're also being guarded about somebody who's coming off of major surgery on his foot and ankle. He had a setback, if you recall. That was another procedure he had to have, which is why he missed all of last year. So they don't want him to do too much in the preseason and risk the regular season. I don't think this is threatening to week 1 in any way. My concern for Michael Thomas remains the same for the entire season. We haven't seen him put together a string of multiple games since he's had this extensive absence. And the question is, will he be able to hold up for 17? That I don't know.
Yeah, that is the question fantasy managers are asking. But as far as week 1 status, not feeling concerned.
No, I think this is protective to make sure he's ready week 1.
All right. What about Chris Godwin? We had a big conversation about him yesterday. We're actually going to dive into Chris Godwin a little bit later in the show again, but just latest updates.
Because we love to talk about Chris Godwin.
Of course we do.
I did see Chris Godwin. Hopefully you saw my post. I posted a very up close photo of him wearing his functional brace. It's what players do when they're coming off an ACL injury. He had a combined ACL, MCL injury. Here's what I thought was interesting. He was at the joint practices with the Titans, so I kind of thought maybe we were going to see him do stuff with them. He didn't really. I mean, he was still doing individual work entirely, a lot of conditioning work, doing some route running. You could tell that they were very specifically calculating the volume of his work. You love to see that because it means they're paying close attention. This is not randomly go out and do some work and come back and tell us how you feel. It's very calculated progression of load to get him to be ready for the start of the year. But he's still essentially non-contact. So what I would say is, yes, he's been making a nice progression, but we are 2 weeks away from the start of the season. He is still not fully engaged. So if anybody out there is thinking, well, when he comes back, he's just going to jump right back into his regular role, I just don't see that happening with how they've behaved thus far. I still maintain that I think Chris Godwin's going to be excellent in the second half of the season. There's no reason to believe he's not. But in that first half, I don't know where he goes from guy returning from injury to Chris Godwin-like.
Interesting. All right. Like I said, we're going to have a little bit more on that later on in the show. But one more, Stefania. Logan Thomas, someone as a tight end we've been seeing, like he's not been a guy in the top 15, even top, I don't think 20 of tight ends with the injury that he has right now. But what's the latest with him and the Commanders?
Yeah, I was looking for my note. But
all the sheets. You got all the papers.
I got all the sheets, but because I wanted to share a couple things with you. So, yes, Logan Thomas doing 7-on-7 drills on Wednesday. And the reason it caught my attention is because Ron Rivera was now saying that it was at least a possibility he could be available week 1. And that was something that I really had not anticipated, was that he'd even be a possibility, because his injury was week 13. And if you remember his year last year, he had a right hamstring injury that cost him 7 weeks. Mm-hmm. Then he comes back from that 2 games later, tears his ACL.
Right.
And he went on the radio earlier in the offseason and said it wasn't just ACL, MCL, 2 meniscus, we call it menisci. But menisci.
I couldn't spell that, but I can say
it. The bottom line is none of that made it sound like he'd be ready to go at the start of the season. So the removal from the PUP list, as we've talked about, doesn't mean you play week 1, but it means you're potentially available. I think he's still early in that progression. We don't have him as a tight end that you'd be drafting.
Yep.
But if you look at where he was last year before he was hurt, he was 7th in total fantasy points among tight ends. Yeah. I mean, he was ahead of people like Mark Andrews, who you might have heard of before. He actually he was on pace to finish 7 or 8 if he had just maintained what he was doing.
Yep.
So I think people might be wondering, well, should I keep an eye on Logan Thomas? Because maybe if you have an injury in the first part of the season, he's a guy you would want to backfill. And I'd say keep an eye on his progression. You're not drafting him. I wouldn't even take him for an IR slot right now. But I would watch. And into the first few weeks, if you start seeing him progress in terms of practice with the team, I'd be looking at stashing him or maybe picking him up if somebody gets hurt.
Maybe a waiver ad later on from that standpoint.
Yeah, as we know, the pickings get slim at tight end in a hurry. So if someone that you drafted early, whether it's a Mike Gesicki or a Noah Fant or Albert Aquabenam, it doesn't work out in those first 4 weeks, perhaps Logan Thomas can fill that void for you at tight end.
All right, let's get into some double trouble.
Double trouble.
Double trouble.
Double trouble. Double trouble.
As of this moment, they're on double secret probation.
All right, look at that list of players from these two teams. Really, it's not like we've had the last couple of days, Field.
I've heard of
Interesting, Daniel. I was wondering where you're going to go with that one, because the way you teed it up, you say, look at that list with some effort and
a little bit of gusto.
Fervor. You're like, look at this list of Byron Pringle and Robert Tunyon. Doesn't quite hit the same as Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce.
Yeah, those guys are a little bit more fun.
Different.
A little bit
That's
different.
Okay,
but
we're here to serve all, and The Packers are sitting here saying, you're going to take shots at us? We've won more regular season games than anybody over the past 3 seasons.
Hey, not just that.
Back-to-back NFL MVP.
Aaron Rodgers has been a top 10 fantasy quarterback 13 of the last 14 seasons. You want to talk about consistency and what it is that he brings to this team field. Knowing, though, in spite of the fact that he's been so consistent over the last basically decade and a half of his football career, he now is no longer playing with Davante Adams. And so how is that going to affect Rodgers for fantasy this year?
Yeah, I mean, of course it's going to affect. And let me start by saying this. I am a big advocate of tiers as opposed to just saying, like, this guy's number 7 amongst quarterbacks versus number 8 versus number 9 versus number 10. I have Aaron Rodgers as quarterback 12. That is at the bottom or near the bottom of tier 2 for me. But I think all the players from tier 2 are more than capable starting quarterbacks that you can leave your draft with. It's guys like Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow and Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. I have no issue whatsoever if that is your quarterback, Dak Prescott as well, coming out of your drafts. I'm just accounting for the fact that Aaron Rodgers lost not just a great wide receiver, a Hall of Fame wide receiver. And if you look at how this roster is constructed as compared to other rosters, the imbalance between Davante Adams and all other Packers wide receivers was greater than any other number 1 wide receiver in the league. Last year, he had more than 1,000 receiving yards, more than the next closest Packers pass catcher. It was not like, this is not Kansas City where Tyreek Hill leaves. And by the way, you still have Travis Kelce, who's one of the, the 10 or 12 best playmakers in the league still. It's a little bit different. So Aaron Rodgers without Davante Adams is still going to be really good. But the top wide receivers in his roster right now offer some question marks. Allen Lazard's a solid player. Romeo Dobbs could be a promising rookie. Christian Watson's got all the speed in the world. Sammy Watkins was the number 4 overall pick at one point. But it's just different. It's just a little bit different. He does not add a ton of value with his legs, but he's the back-to-back MVP. I'm not down on Aaron Rodgers. Relatively speaking, I am. But Aaron Rodgers is going to be more than fine this season.
So it's interesting. I'm a little down on him, but for me, he just is on the borderline that top 10. I was looking at all the rankings last night, sort of figuring where would I put Aaron Rodgers, but I would rather have Matthew Stafford than him, which right now he's ranked by consensus above Matthew Stafford. He's above Trey Lance. I'm not sure that season ends that way because he's not just losing Davante Adams. He's really losing a lot of the offensive coaching. You know, he doesn't have Hackett anymore. He doesn't have the Titans coach is gone. He really is in a system where I think he's going to be asked to do more, I guess is my perception. And I think him calling out the receivers is part of that. Also, Davante Adams, not just a great receiver in single coverage, but usually drawing double coverage. What happens to Allen Lazard if he's the de facto number 1? What happens when he starts drawing that kind of coverage?
Those are the question marks. And just if you're sitting here thinking to yourself, how on earth could Field have Aaron Rodgers 12th amongst quarterbacks?
Oh my gosh, Field.
Just look at the quarterbacks that we have ahead of him. This is not where we have guys who are totally unproven. We're talking about everybody's fine with the likes of the Lamars and the Mahomes and the Herberts and the Bradys. Dak Prescott, awesome fantasy quarterback, 37 passing touchdowns last year. Joe Burrow, who would ever argue against Joe Burrow as an awesome player right now? Russell Wilson, who's been the number 1 quarterback in fantasy recently. So this is as much a reflection of not just the fact that Davante Adams is gone, but also just how great the quarterback options are this year. If I leave my league of any size with Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback, I'm totally fine with it. I'm just hedging a little bit because I don't want to overlook just how important Davante Adams was to that offense.
I look at those quarterbacks that we just had up on the screen, and I feel like I want all of them over Aaron Rodgers, if I'm being honest. When I look at it, Tom Brady, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, and Field, all this is like you're saying, to a tier standpoint, there's so many good quarterbacks in that range. And so if I'm picking one, I think I'd rather have one that didn't just lose his top wide receiver and maybe has better options within the offense. And that's really all it is for me. I think Aaron Rodgers has the weakest wide receiving core out of all 4 of those quarterbacks. And I don't think that's all that close. So for me, listen, this is why we're having tier conversations, right? Rather than straight up ranking conversations.
Well, it sounds like a hot take when you say Aaron Rodgers is not a top 10 quarterback. It's kind of a cold take, right? I know the numbers bear out what he's been a top 10 quarterback in 13 of 14 seasons. Aaron Rodgers has also never had a receiving group that looks like what it does right now. That's
Correct.
it. This is the end.
Thank you.
Finito.
That's
no more
basically
to
the
say. I love
summary.
Aaron Rodgers. I'm just a little bit down on him.
That's fair. All right, Stefania, knowing that Davante Adams is now in Las Vegas, does Alan Lazard have a chance to stand up and be the true wide receiver one in this offense, or do you think that there's somebody else that is going to do that here?
Well, that's I kind of gave it away a little bit with talking about how it impacts Aaron Rodgers, but I am concerned about Alan Lazard for those reasons that, you know, he has definitely been a preferred target for Aaron Rodgers. And we see that when Rodgers likes someone, he elevates them. Yeah. I mean, he's able to get guys elevated off the practice squad. He's able to turn them into top receivers. We've seen that year in, year out. But I think it is different this year. And I think it's different because the defenses are not going to respect the other members of the receiving corps in the way that they respected Davante Adams, who is so good off coverage and who could make guys miss and who could still manage to catch passes that were contested. That's not going to necessarily be the case for all these young receivers. I mean, if they're dropping a lot in practice and he's not seeing them work the way he wants to, don't you feel like there are going to be growing pains as you get into the season? Yeah. And if Alan Lazard is the most experienced and the best among them and becomes the focal point, well, then he's going to draw more coverage, and that's going to make it that much harder for him.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Stefania said. The only thing that I would add is that all the concerns you're also bringing to the table are now accounted for in his ADP because his going is nearly wide receiver 40. So if this was a wide receiver 20 conversation surrounding Alan Lazard, I'd say, I don't know, guys. I'm just not so certain that he is definitely going to be the number one wide receiver in Green Bay. I do think he will be because trust is one of those words that for a few quarterbacks it matters more than others. Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers probably top that list. And just a couple of quotes amongst many that Aaron Rodgers has shared so far this offseason about Alan Lazard. Quote, he's capable of a lot. Since his first day here, he's turned a lot of heads. Another quote, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve from quarterback to number one wide receiver, but Aaron Rodgers has been a stan for Alan Lazard, which is why if you have to choose one Packers wide receiver to draft highest, I have Alan Lazard as my pick. We'll talk about a couple of the other guys, or I guess we could, but if you have to choose one, my preference would be Alan Lazard, and the upside could be 10 or 12 receiving touchdowns, maybe close to 1,000 receiving yards. And if you're getting that player wide receiver 40, it's going to be one of the steals of the draft.
I agree with that from that standpoint. You know, there are other wide receivers in this offense. And even though Mike Clay isn't here today, apparently Mike sent us in a video about some of the rest of these pass catchers. Himself. Yeah, so let's see what this video is all about.
What?
Time to go hunting for deep sleepers. I found a Romeo Dobbs! I found a Romeo Dobbs!
Oh
Get
my
the man some help.
He's so good. Mike is so game to do everything, too.
I love it.
If you're listening on the audio version only, hilarious clip of Mike in his pool who dove maybe 18 inches deep?
Maybe 18 inches, yeah.
To get Romeo
With
Dobbs.
goggles. With goggles.
His daughter's goggles, but we really had to expand those as a part in order to get him in. But
So good.
are you buying Romeo Dobbs? Because it sounds like Aaron Rodgers has had a couple of nice things to say about him this offseason, and I know we just made a joke about it as a late-round flyer, and we've said that term a lot.
Yeah.
But Romeo Dobbs really feels like he fits that term as someone that you're targeting late in draft because of potential upside field.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those where you have to be careful with preseason hype.
Of course.
Because it can work out for better and worse. Sometimes it prevails, and it is what happens in August happens again in September and throughout the season. And then sometimes we hear of players that are lighting the world on fire, and then all of a sudden they come back down to earth when the games begin. I don't really have much of a take on Romeo Dobbs other than I'm with you. He's a 15th, 16th round target if you'd like to go that direction because his wagon is hitched to Aaron Rodgers. There are a lot of wide receiver flyers that we've already discussed and many more that we'll dive into. So more than anything, I just want to educate people on who Romeo Dobbs is. Played his college ball in Nevada, really accomplished receiver there for the Wolfpack, 4th round pick, back-to-back 1,000-plus yard seasons to end his college career. We've seen 3 straight really, really good draft classes with wide receivers. Romeo Dobbs is part of this year's draft class, obviously, as a rookie. And I think he has a chance to be yet another mid-round contributor It may not be right away, but of course, he is a fantasy sleeper for those that are looking for a last-round pick.
Yeah. And not the only rookie wide receiver that they drafted. Obviously, Christian Watson, they took in the second round, Stefania, but he's been
Dealing
banged
with
up.
an issue. Yeah, he has a knee injury. I think he's had discomfort while running, and he ended
That's
up
not
having
good for wide receivers,
Yeah,
right?
he ended up having a procedure. This was late in OTAs. He was having this issue. He ended up having a procedure on his knee, and so he's still coming back from that. And yeah, it's not. When you have a rookie who's coming into a new system and a demanding system and not being able to operate at 100%, that already puts you behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, coming out of North Dakota State there. I think he needs a little polish to his game, and part of the reason I think why Romeo Dobbs, even though he was drafted later, has a little bit more fantasy hype than Christian Watson, because it's not like once he just comes back, he's going to be a polished NFL-ready wide receiver.
Well, he's just been on the field too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Christian Watson we've barely seen.
Just Monday, 11 on 11s for the first time.
Worth noting that Christian Watson landed, and this is sort of inside baseball for those that care about these things, but he was placed on the PUP list at the start of training camp. If you're a rookie, in order to go on the PUP list, it has to be an injury that was suffered while you were doing an NFL-related activity, which indicates that this was not something that lingered from his college days.
Right.
He got hurt at some point during the spring with the
OTAs,
Packers.
yeah.
OTAs. So not a previous injury. This is a new thing for Christian Watson. So I'm not sure setback is the right word for it, but he's been a little bit delayed in his progress just because of that injury.
Interesting. So this kind of goes back to what we talked about yesterday with the NFI list, where if he had been on the
Right,
NFI
Jameson
list,
Williams,
Jameson,
NFI.
right.
Christian
Because it was
Watson,
college
PUP.
injury, yep.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of
No, that's good.
clarification
these
there,
are-
but
Yeah, terminology matters.
that's very good knowledge.
one of them could pop off. One of them could.
Totally.
One of them could.
I had Christian Watson pegged as a breakout before all of this happened. So,
You know what? Let me just take
'Cause we're throwing
let me
some
just take
darts.
30 seconds here and just say this is the thing about fantasy
Yeah.
football, right? Is that like we can make really compelling cases for any of these wide receivers. Alan Lazard, Sammy Watkins, even he's the most experienced of these guys. Romeo Dobbs had the best training camp amongst the rookies. Christian Watson, most talented of them all,
Flies.
perhaps, right?
Yeah.
We're just throwing a dart here. It's
course
hard.
we are.
It's a hard part of
what
our
we do.
job, and it's a lovely part of our job as well because when you guess right, you feel good, you feel emboldened in your neck stances.
when you
but
guess wrong, that's really fun too.
yeah, it always is because people remind you about it. But I would say that this Packers wide receiver group is near the top of the list of great mysteries going into the fantasy season that also has a ton of upside. There are other, like I'm trying to think of a team that has the Jets or the Patriots, who I think we're not quite certain who's going to be the number one pass catcher out of those two teams. But I don't know that either one of those teams is likely to produce a top 20 wide receiver.
Yeah.
We could certainly see one in Green Bay.
Yeah.
We could certainly see one amongst the Kansas City pass catchers, which is part of the reason why we have dove so deep on both of them this offseason.
Yeah. Another pass catcher that we liked previously, Stefania, was Robert Tonyan, because he was a touchdown maker in this Packers offense.
Big Bob Tunyon.
Big Bob
I
Tunyon.
learned from Aaron Rodgers that it rhymes with Funyon. It's Bob
Oh.
Tunyon.
Oh, okay.
Right? I mean, when Aaron Rodgers teaches you things,
Then
you
you
pay
gotta-
attention. You pay
that's right.
attention. That's how you stay on his good side.
I just respect that you said Funyun and not onion.
No, Funyon.
Did Roger specifically say Funyun the last time?
I believe that happened.
I don't know.
Somewhere.
One of my friends,
Somewhere
whenever
it
he
came
texts me about Rob Tunyon, he just types Rob and then puts the onion emoji.
Stop it.
Which he's
yeah.
forgetting a T, but I don't
Or-
call him
or-
out on that. It's all
He
good.
should put an F in front of the onion.
Ooh.
Funyon.
Honestly,
Rob
what he
Funyun.
should
Like-
do is he should be a brand ambassador for Tunyons of Funyuns.
that has to have happened already, right?
If it hasn't, Robert, just call me, man. We
He
can
goes
make
by
this
Kinda
Bob.
look
happen.
like
He
with
goes
your
by
hair
Bob.
too.
Oh, Bob.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
sorry.
I don't know.
I go by
That's-
Daniel.
Look,
Sorry.
it's what Aaron Rodgers said. I only do what Aaron Rodgers
Let's talk about him, though.
Okay, let's talk about Bob Tunyon, who tore his ACL in Week 8. And remember, he was sort of a touchdown factory for Aaron Rodgers at one point in time. And they obviously, you talk about chemistry and trust being so important for Aaron Rodgers. He has it with his tight end. Unfortunately, ACL injury, I believe, is the Arizona game. He went down, so that was Week 8. And so that middle of the season, kind of a toss-up of whether you're going to be ready to start the year off the PUP list. He is on track to be available for Week 1. I would still remind people, return to play, not necessarily return to performance. There may be some acclimation to football playing to get him up to speed and look like the guy that he was. But I'm encouraged with his progress, and I think that he could be fantasy relevant by the time the season's over.
Absolutely. Absolutely, especially if he comes back and stays healthy. This team needs pass catchers. And right now, if you told me who is their end zone target in this offense, Alan Lazard, I think, is the guy that I'm thinking of most. But we've watched Bobby Tunyon do this before. Bob
You
Tunyon.
know who's a sleeper on this team?
Randall Cobb.
All of them. They're all sleepers, right? None of one's being the highest drafted pass catcher right now amongst wide receivers is, as we mentioned, Alan Lazard at wide receiver 39. Okay. Yeah. That's like probably the 13th, 14th round. Bob Tunyon barely being drafted. They're all sleepers. Yeah. If one of them hits, anybody that puts some optimism in them is going to be richly rewarded. If none of them hit, no one's going to be that much worse for the wearer. That's just how this offense is. And it was not like that not been like that for 14 seasons. In year 15, it is like that.
It's interesting. You always talk about looking at the money. They gave Tunyon a 1-year deal. So it tells you they're not making a long-term investment, but it's kind of a prove-it year. So I think he would be very motivated to the extent that he has control over how that offense looks to perform well.
Well, the one position that it feels like the Packers are set up for fantasy success is the running backs, right? And I kind of, it's tough because it's so easy to bleed the line between these two fields. So I want to talk about them individually and then talk about them together as a package. But Aaron Jones right now being drafted as running back 11. You have him as running back 11. And he's somebody that we think if you grab him, I think as an early RB2 or your tail end RB1 because you went wide receiver heavy, he still has a ton of upside in this offense with his pass catching ability.
Yeah, I think that's the thing for both of these players that makes them really intriguing is that we've already heard Aaron Rodgers reference the possibility of both of them having at least 50 catches this year. That's something that Aaron Jones did last year. We've also heard Matt LaFleur refer to them as running back 1A and 1A. So let's just go back to last year and roll the tape for a second that Aaron Jones in 2021 played in 15 of 17 games. His raw numbers for the year: 171 carries, 799 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. He added 52 catches on 65 targets for 391 yards and 6 touchdowns. He was second on the Packers in terms of catches. A.J. Dillon, 187 carries for 803 yards, so he had more rushes and rushing yards and rushing touchdowns than Aaron Jones, but he had 34 catches on 37 targets for 313 yards and only 2 touchdowns. So Jones had the edge in receiving. Dillon had the very slight edge in rushing, although Dillon did play all 17 games. This is pretty close to an even split here in terms of utilization, and that's where it gets a little bit interesting because their gap in terms of rank is significant.
20 places, 20 running backs field.
Now, here's the reason why that's the case, is that I think Aaron Jones is due for a massively expanded receiving role. If you go back and look at the sample size, and it's a relatively small one, but games in which Davante Adams has been out and Aaron Jones has been active, he has clearly taken on a much larger passing game role. He's a really good pass catcher. He showed it last year in that game against Arizona where he led the Packers in terms of catches when Davante Adams was out. A.J. Dillon, I think, will see an expanded passing game role, but the edge goes to Aaron Jones. I'm highest on A.J. Dillon. I've got him at 27 in my ranks. I am optimistic, but I'm okay with both of them being drafted where they are. I just really like A.J. Dillon as a 0 RB target or just a 3rd running back or a 4th running back, depending on how your draft has shaken out so far. Both really talented guys, and I'll use this stat one more time because we're talking about the Packers. Over the past 2 seasons, Davante Adams had 12 touchdown catches from 5 yards or closer. They don't have a Davante Adams on their team. I'm not saying all of those opportunities are just going to become runs, but there's a chance that many of them are. I think A.J. Dillon is the best touchdown maker at the goal line for them. Part of the reason why I'm optimistic. But Aaron Jones also, this is not like Aaron Jones is, Darren Sproles size and really only used in the passing game. So I'm optimistic about both of these players, and I have the edge to Aaron Jones over A.J. Dillon, but I think both of them are strong values at their current ADP.
I love A.J. Dillon as somebody, if I'm going hero running back, where I'm waiting and waiting and waiting on a second running back that I think has a ton of value that you can grab late. But to your point, Field, as a running back 3, as a running back 4, so much value here in this offense. Stefania, anything you want to add?
Well, it's interesting because the question is, can they both be weekly starters? And is there a world in which you draft both of them? I would draft both of them, even if I wasn't starting both of them weekly, because of exactly what Field said, which is if anything happens to Aaron Jones, we know that A.J. Dillon's role
top 10
bumps up tremendously, right?
And vice versa.
Yeah,
this is one of those insurance. Now, I don't want to say insurance back places, but like if he does go down, you know who the back is going to be to replace him.
This reminds me of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. In terms of fantasy value, is that there's a chance both of them are ranked inside our top 25 every single week. The edge will always go to Aaron Jones and Nick Chubb. But Kareem Hunt and A.J. Dillon will be very valuable because Dillon gets a lot of. We're fascinated by the fact that his quads are the size of the Empire State Building, right?
They are tremendous.
Really good pass catcher. soft hands, good in the passing game. When he's been utilized, he's been effective there. So wouldn't surprise me if he has. I wouldn't be stunned if they do both have over 50 receptions. And for all the things we just said about the receivers, and there were some nice things in there, the reality is maybe the guys that benefit the most from Devontae Adams' departure are the two running backs.
Yeah.
Tell you what.
Trust is important, and Aaron Rodgers trusts the running backs.
A.J. Dillon had 47 fourth quarter carries last year, 47 to Aaron Jones' 19. So when it gets down to the end of the game, you know that they're using those big quads to be able to help bring the game home.
I think that helps. I'm not sure it matters that much for fantasy value, right? Because some of that's just when they're bleeding out the clock. And I don't know if they're going to be quite as dominant this year as they have been in recent seasons. But, yeah, I think that both these guys, I love A.J. Dillon. Big-time player.
Packers have 11 wins right now based on Caesars for the season total. Stefania, you going over or under on 11 wins for Green Bay?
Under.
Under. I like it. I'm going under 2. Field.
Yeah, I'm going over by 1. I got them at 12-5 this year.
Wins?
Yep.
Even with 2 losses to the Detroit Lions?
Well, they'll find a way to go 12-3 in other games.
Everywhere else. All right. That sounds like a plan. All right. We're going to talk about the Bears in a second. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. Summer's all about outdoor cookouts, backyard get-togethers, and, of course, fantasy football drafts, and that means plenty of time for Miller Time. And with just 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12-ounce serving, it's the perfect light beer to sip on all summer long. And draft all draft long. It's been proven over time that with a Miller Lite in your hand, your drafting ability improves. And so who doesn't want that? You want to draft better. In a world of endless scrolling through delivery options, you know what you're getting when you get Miller Lite. It's beer. With great taste and only 96 calories, Miller Lite is brewed with beer lovers in mind because Miller Lite is for those who actually want to taste their beer. This summer, have more fun with the Beer Lovers Light Beer, the great tasting Miller Lite. There's nothing like the first sip of an ice cold beer on a hot summer day, no matter where you are. So whenever it's Miller time for you, by a fire pit, poolside, a dive bar, wherever you're at, make sure that you grab a Miller Lite and make the most of it. So next time you're getting ready to enjoy cold ones with your crew, go to MillerLite.com/FFF to find delivery options near you, or you can pick up some Miller Lite pretty much anywhere they sell beer. It's Miller time. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces.
Kick off your investing journey by exploring exchange-traded funds. Exchange-traded funds, known as ETFs for short, create baskets of stocks, bonds, and other assets that you can buy in a single trade, helping you avoid putting all of your hopes on a single draft pick. At Global X, they specialize in ETFs that track emerging technologies like the rise of electric vehicles and strategies designed to generate income. Visit globalxetfs.com to discover more.
All right, let's talk Chicago Bears. If we thought Packers were fun, let's start with Justin Fields.
Yeah.
All right. We've heard Mike talk about this. It's all about second-year quarterbacks, wanting to see what it is that they can do with the next step within their maturation here. And Justin Fields, in all honesty, they didn't add a lot around him in the offense. That's one of the things that kind of gives me a little bit of pause here with his next step. Obviously, we're expecting him to utilize his legs. But are you looking at Justin Fields in any 10 or 12-team single quarterback leagues this year?
He is a potential waiver wire add at some point during your bye weeks, but that's it for me right now. We do not know just how much Justin Fields will be utilized as a runner this season. Trey Lance, who there are question marks, or there have been question marks about his throwing during the preseason. He's been a little bit up and down. We know he's going to run the football. He had 2 starts last year. He had 24 rushing attempts, and he plays in one of the most incredible, dominant running games in the NFL. We are confident that Trey Lance, who has better weapons, by the way, will run a lot. For Justin Fields, we don't know for sure how much he will or won't run. Luke Getsy, their new offensive coordinator, comes from the Green Bay Packers. If they are looking to lean on Justin Fields to the tune of 8 to 10 carries per game, he's got a real shot at being somewhere between a top 12 and 15 quarterback because, as we know, all you got to do is be a top 5 rusher amongst quarterbacks, and you got a chance.
That's right.
He had over 400 rushing yards last season. If that number grows to 600, Justin Fields will be near that top 15 in our rankings every single week. We don't know how much he's going to be utilized as a runner. I'm optimistic and hopeful it'll be a lot. What we don't know as well, though, is just how much he's going to come around as a thrower. I went back and just watched a little bit of Chicago yesterday and prepping for the show, and there are some big-time throws from Justin Fields, no doubt about it. There are also some games that were just downright difficult to watch. And I get it. Circumstances around him were just awful last year. It was a coaching staff that was in a lame duck season. His highest paid wide receiver, Allen Robinson, became a shell of himself. The offensive line was not good. All those things are fair to point out. I think that structurally, they're better this year. There is better infrastructure on the coaching staff around him. There is a plan, a vision of how to develop him. But as of right now, the Bears still have a thin receiver group. They still have an offensive line that's going to be it's going to be perhaps average. But if it is, it's also still very young. They've got potential to have at least one rookie starting along the offensive line, and Braxton Jones, a 5th-round pick out of Utah. Not a great offensive line, in my opinion. So that's why I have Justin Fields where he's at quarterback 19, whereas you've got other quarterbacks who have comparable rushing upside or even less rushing upside who are a little bit ahead of him. So I like the player long term. I'm still really hopeful for Justin Fields, but this is a massive year for Justin Fields to figure out what kind of player he can be. But I'm a little further down in my ranks because of those question marks.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. Let's talk about his running back, David Montgomery, right now going as a 5th-round pick. And Field, if I'm looking at this right, he's had 225 carries and 40 catches in each of the last 2 years. That means 260 opportunities, which is a thing that I know that you look at when it comes to running backs. More than 260 opportunities.
Yeah, opportunities for those that aren't familiar, carries plus targets. So that's good. Now, it's also a little bit of a durability stat, right, because he's been largely available over the past 2 seasons. If David Montgomery gets used in a similar way to how he's been used the past 2 seasons, he's going to deliver exactly on return. He's going to be an RB2.
It's just not going to be sexy and it's not going to feel super fun. But guess what?
Great.
It's still going to be an RB2.
But last year, he had 21.2 opportunities per game, 17.3 carries, 3.9 targets per game. If he gets that, great. Take that every day of the week. What we don't know, though, is whether this coaching staff is going to be as reliant on him as a near workhorse as the last coaching staff was. And as we look around the NFL, so many coaching staffs are starting to shy away from that single back that's Jonathan Taylor or Derrick Henry or Zeke Elliott, right? We're seeing more and more running back by committee. He's a really good receiver, though. That helps.
Yeah.
Really useful receiver. So just to make an illustration of how much he was being utilized last year, he had 81.2% of Chicago's running back touches when he was active. He missed a few games last year. Derrick Henry and Najee Harris were the only guys ahead of him in terms of that percentage. So He was really busy. If that number drops to 65, then he's maybe closer to RB20 than RB12 or 13. That's what you have to sort of project here, is just how much you think this new coaching staff will lean on him like the old coaching staff did. I have some questions about that, but I still really like the player. Not an explosive guy, averaged less than 4 yards per carry last season. Part of that because of the offensive line, but he had just 1 rush over 30 yards. So I think there's some real positives here.
Yeah.
Good pass catcher, busy guy. The limitations would be the offensive line and the possibility that this coaching staff leans on other players like Khalil Herbert a little bit more. So I'm going to go with, I think he's a low-end RB2 is basically how I evaluate him going into the season.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think Field touched on the point. There's actually the stat that you used is one that I used to talk about Elijah Mitchell because it always surprises people, like the percentage of touches in games played, these opportunities that Elijah Mitchell actually is in that grouping of the top 5. And I know we're not talking about him, but it just shows you that when there's trust for an offensive coaching system, who they are going to lean on. And that's why this year we really don't know how that's going to play out with Montgomery, because opportunity was a big part of what made him attractive in fantasy.
Totally.
And I agree with you. It's not the sexiest pick. You're picking because you're thinking, what can I count on? And I don't know if you can, because the whole Chicago offense to me feels like a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, he reminds me of Frank Gore when he was in Indy. Every year, Frank Gore in Indy would have finishes like a top 15 to 18 running back. That may be hyperbolizing a little bit, but there was a string where it felt like you knew exactly what you were getting with Frank Gore. Never going to be a top 5 guy, but was going to stay on the field, was going to get a lot of touches, a lot of opportunities, and probably finish somewhere between RB15 and RB20.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I size up David Montgomery right now, because if he gets those opportunities from the past 2 seasons, he'll be exactly that.
Let's go through a quick name game here, because he's a tough one. And it's not even tough, but sometimes it's so easy to get enticed by names or opportunities on other offenses that you think might be better, that you pass up on someone that has a really safe floor like David Montgomery. So, Stefania, J.K. Dobbins and all the health issues there, or David Montgomery?
Yeah, I'm going with the guy who's healthy now. We don't even know when J.K. Dobbins will play, to be honest. So it's not even a question for me.
I'm keeping my eyes on J.K. Dobbins, too. I'm with you, Stefania. I'm a little nervous there. I got David Montgomery.
All right, what about Travis Etienne or David Montgomery, Stefania?
So this is a hard one because I think Travis Etienne is going to get a ton of work early. It'll be interesting to see as James Robinson gets into the mix, sort of how those things shake out. So if you're looking at consistency, minus the coaching and offense creation questions we have in Chicago, David Montgomery has been very consistent. Travis Etienne, I think, could be fantastic some weeks and then not as good other weeks.
Yeah, I've got David Montgomery.
I think the upside for me is higher with Etienne, though.
So I've got David Montgomery one slot ahead of Travis Etienne, but it depends on what you need. If you're looking for the guy that could be a top 10 running back, it's Travis Etienne. If you're looking for the guy that's probably not going to fail you, not dramatically fail you, it's David Montgomery.
It's David Montgomery. All right, what about Breece Hall or David Montgomery, a rookie running back here we haven't seen yet in this Jets offense, Stefania?
No, but we're excited about him.
We sure are.
And I'm probably going with Breece Hall.
Okay.
I'm going with David Montgomery. Two Iowa State guys here. David Montgomery just ahead of Breece Hall. I've got David Montgomery because a lot of optimism surrounding Breece Hall for obvious reasons. But if this Jets team is not very good.
Well, and if they keep getting injured up front.
Offensive line injuries are already bothering them, and if they are behind early, and we've talked about their early season slate, gets much easier in the second half, could be some Michael Carter early.
I was going to say, and Michael Carter is going to get some playing time whether or not Breece Hall is in there. Khalil Herbert is not quite the same kind of guy when it comes to that, so it's not like David Montgomery's going to split time the same way that Breece Hall is going to. What about Ezekiel Elliott? One of the only guys being drafted ahead of David Montgomery right now. Stefania, where are you going? Zeke and the Cowboys, who were the second highest scoring offense last year?
Well, I'm a Zeke apologist. I blame a lot of things on what was going on last year. I'm a little nervous, to be honest, because I'm looking at Dallas and talk about injuries up front. They're getting them too. It means you're counting on Zeke to have the explosiveness back that we lost last year. I think it's there. I'm just a little concerned about what the entire Dallas offense is going to look like. I think if everything goes well, he could be great.
Yeah.
I'm nervous, but I'm probably going Zeke for upside opportunity.
Yeah, I've got David Montgomery just ahead of Zeke because there's a possibility that Tony Pollard's role, which is at around 11 touches last year, inflates by just a little bit to maybe 12 or 13 opportunities per game. So I've got David Montgomery just ahead of Zeke, but I do value them kind of similarly.
Yeah.
Not just in turn, like obviously when you say they're ranked next to each other, they're ranked similarly, but just in the idea that both should see really good volume. Neither one's going to be a big play threat, but Zeke could score 10 rushing touchdowns this year. David Montgomery could have 55 catches, and neither of those things would surprise me.
Yeah, I agree with you there. All right. Today's Insurance Back is brought to you by Geico. Switch to Geico today and see all the ways that you could save. And we mentioned Khalil Herbert as a part of this conversation, where when David Montgomery is out on the field, it's not like he usually splits time with Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert is the kind of guy just like a Alexander Madison. When Dalvin Cook misses time, that's when you see Alexander Madison. So is Khalil Herbert the kind of person that you have to draft? Is this an insurance back situation in this year's fantasy season?
I don't think it's a must. I think it can be justified because you're right. In previous years, we saw that it was basically David Montgomery unto himself when he was healthy. They also drafted a kid named Treston Ebner in the 6th round out of Baylor, who has been really impressive in the preseason. He's also been utilized returning kicks. Maybe that suggests that his role is going to be more change of pace and special teams early. I don't think it's a must to draft Khalil Herbert, but I think it's a really important name to have on the radar because if something happens to David Montgomery, he has already shown himself more than capable of filling in.
Okay. Stefania, anything to add?
No,
Love it.
Field summed up my exact thoughts.
All right, so let's move on to the pass catchers, Stefania, where Darnell Mooney is the wide receiver in
He's
this
fast.
offense.
Yep.
He is very
Lightning
fast.
fast.
Really excited to see what he can do this year to take the next step with Justin Fields. How are you looking at Darnell Mooney as you head into your draft season?
Well, I think, I think he has potential to be top 15 wide receiver in this offense. He is also a favored target. We know that. We saw last year. I mean, we talk about what happened with Allen Robinson, now departed for the Rams. It was never the relationship quarterback to pass catcher between Justin Fields and Allen Robinson really
didn't flourish.
It disintegrated if it was ever going to be there. And Darnell Mooney seemed to come out on top. And I think they only build on that. So even though we don't fully know how this offense is going to look with the new regime, chemistry, once it's established, is you're not taking that away.
Yeah.
And so I think Darnell Mooney has a chance to excel in this offense when things go well.
Love Darnell Mooney, one of my favorite players in the NFL right now. And there was some really good stuff last season when he was basically the clear-cut and only number one wide receiver there. Even with Allen Robinson, he far surpassed him. even with all the quarterback turnover there. Nick Foles and Andy Dalton also playing. But just a couple of numbers to make the case. He had at least 5 targets in every game but one last season. He was 11th in the NFL in total targets. He was top 20 in both receptions and receiving yards. I like him as a player. I like the situation. And I'll just mention this. And I know that these are the kind of things that sometimes work out and sometimes prove to be fool's gold. But Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney, like this.
Yep.
Best pals. Spent a ton of time together this offseason training. That's going to bear out a little bit on the field as well. The Bears offense could be dictated by how this partnership looks. At one point this year, when our sleepers, busts, and breakouts, that's a file that is constantly updated. I, at one point, made the case for Darnell Mooney as a breakout player this year. Touchdown upside has to be considered here, but I think there's a chance he has 165 targets this year.
Is Darnell Mooney the correct answer to question, what kind of bear is best?
Great reference there.
Thank you.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Darnell
Mooney is the best bear.
Yes.
Yes. That is the answer. All right, good.
Bear beats Battlestar Galactica.
What about, let's talk about Cole Kmet.
Yeah.
Let's talk about another guy that, I mean, honestly, I know that we're really excited about Darnell Mooney. I'm excited about Cole Kmet to see what he can do because last year we saw so much potential there, right? He was one of the only guys, one of 2 players with 90-plus targets and 0 touchdowns. Positive touchdown regression is going to come for Cole Kmet
Mike
this
Clay
year.
reference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even when Mike's not here, he's still a part of the show. How is it that you're targeting Cole Kmet here as a tight end? Because he's someone that, if you're grabbing him, it's going to be a later on in your
round
draft.
is what it is right now.
Yeah.
15th round is his average draft position. So how I am targeting him is sooner than the masses are targeting him because you're right. He got extremely unlucky last year in the touchdown department. Cole Kmet was a 2nd-round pick. He was the highest drafted tight end in the year that he entered the NFL draft. Really good player, good athlete. Not Kyle Pitts. Good, solid athlete. Probably going to be number 2 or 3 in terms of targets for the Bears this year. David Montgomery could be number 2 ahead of him. Cole Kmet should be a very busy guy. I like him a lot. He had at least 5 targets in 11 games last season. That number should be steady in preseason action with Justin Fields on the field. He has seemed to prefer looking the way of Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney, those are the 2 guys that can carry the Bears passing game this season.
When you look at the top 3 pass catchers, are going to be 1 wide receiver, 1 running back, and 1 tight end, and there's no other wide receivers in that offense. That's part of the pause that I have on Justin Fields from that perspective, right? Because his number 2 pass catcher might be his running back. His number 3 pass catcher might be his tight end. We don't even get to any of the other wide receivers until we get to his 4th or 5th potential option in that room. So, Stefania, anything to add on Cole Kmet
No, just
here?
concerned about the offense as a whole. And you talk about positive touchdown regression, but you have to, will they possess the ball enough for it to make a huge difference? I guess is my question.
Yeah, that's a
and
great
I'm not
question.
convinced. So he'd be outside. He's outside of my top 10.
I'm just really hoping that Cole Kmet becomes that insurance option for Justin Fields in the red zone and in the end zone when he is looking for somebody to be able to get touchdowns. Stefania, do you have any tips when it comes to insurance options?
Do I?
Yeah.
Might I?
Sorry, I should have.
Well, Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance?
I love it.
Of course you would. After all, who doesn't love a great deal? Am I right?
You are
and when
right.
it comes to great rates on insurance for all the things in your life, Geico can help. Like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV.
I got 2 of those.
Even help with homeowners, condo, or renters coverage. You could save even more with a special discount when you bundle your coverages. Plus, add the easy-to-use Geico mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance and more, and choosing to switch to Geico becomes an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save with great rates and discounts. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com to get a rate quote or contact your local agent and get started seeing how much you could save.
Fantasy football fans, join the next generation of fantasy football with Rainmakers Football, their first ever NFT fantasy game from DraftKings. It's the only NFT fantasy game licensed by the NFLPA, and now you can play for millions in prizes all season long by building the ultimate NFT franchise. Right now, everyone can get their first full roster starter pack for free. And playing Rainmakers is really simple. You buy, sell, bid, and win player card NFTs of the biggest names in the game through regular drops and auctions on the DraftKings marketplace. Craft lineups of athletes from your NFT collection and earn points for touchdowns, receptions, and more, just like you do when you're playing daily fantasy football. Build your NFT franchise and enter free Rainmaker football contests all season long to compete for millions in prizes. The next generation of fantasy sports is here. So download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now, sign up with the promo code FFF, click the Rainmakers tile, and opt in to get your first card free. Plus, play for millions in prizes all football season while building the ultimate NFT franchise with Rainmakers Football. That's promo code FFF. Build, play, win. Only at DraftKings. Contest entries dependent on type and number of NFTs held. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details.
Top 5 efforts so far this season. Wow, really good. You stuck the landing there.
Thank you. Thank you. That one, it felt
You're
pretty
nervous.
good. It helped because Stefania really crushed the Geico read leading into it. So I just had a lot of, enthusiasm going into that
But
one.
that last line for those that listen to the podcast at 1.5 or 1.25 speed is going to sound like a snap of a finger.
Like the Micro Machines guy from back in the day. Do you remember that? Oh, I wish you could have seen Field's face when I just said that, Stefania.
When you
What are you
said back in the
talking
day.
about?
He doesn't know the Micro Machines guy.
I know. That's
Back
what
in
you've
the
got to
day.
look at me for any references back
If
in
the
the
year
day.
doesn't begin with a 2, I don't know what you're talking about.
You're fired.
Why?
Oh, underrated. All right, let's do some social questions, and I want to start with a tweet. We got this tweet yesterday coming out of the Chris Godwin conversation that we had. I believe that we have it to throw it up on the screen. It comes from Josh Falk. It says, I've been hearing how high you guys have been on Chris Godwin, but I have one reservation. Stefania might be great insight on this, and I haven't pulled the official stats, but it feels like players in a year post-ACL tear frequently deal with hamstring issues and other soft tissue injuries like Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley, and Todd Gurley. There are also no guarantees that if he is 100%, that he returns to pre-ACL form. Curious of your thoughts on this take because everyone in the fantasy community, including us yesterday on the show, thinks that Godwin is a smash this year, and I have reservations. Josh, I think this is a super high-level fantasy question. I really love it. I love it.
I love the question. I love Josh for thinking about this.
Agreed.
Because he's actually right that there is data to suggest that the biggest risk in the year following an ACL injury is a secondary soft tissue injury. That is the number one risk. The graft is strong. For the most part, by the time guys are returning, they're in a good window of where the graft is. So when we talk about risk of re-injury, we're not talking about re-injury for ACL. That's relatively low. In fact, it's very low. It can happen, but it's very low. But soft tissue injuries, because players are not quite at the strength they were pre-injury, and hamstrings are number one. So when they start to decelerate, and deceleration is the longest skill to get back. We now have data to show that. It's not accelerating, it's decelerating. So you think about receivers stop plant. They slow down differently. They don't stop as hard as they used to. They don't cut as hard as they used to. And when they start to do that, they run the risk of hamstring injury. So great question, Josh. That being said, I will say this is why I land where I land on Chris Godwin. I love him for the back half of the season. Wide receivers can return and be productive in the first year, but it usually takes a bit. So if you're looking at it just as, if he is eligible to play week 1 through 4, let's say, since we know he's not on the PUP list, let's say he comes back in that range. I'm not expecting Chris Godwin to be pre-injury Chris Godwin right away, but you'd see more of a trajectory of him going up as the season moves along. And I think that's good. That's good and healthy and normal. It's the players like Dalvin Cook who looked so good out of the gate, and the team was like, okay, you're going to touch the ball.
Let's let him go.
Let's let him go. And was utilized so much, end up with a hamstring injury that compromised him for the remainder of that first year. And so it's a very real and important question. I like Chris Godwin this year, but I like him with that context around it.
Field, do you have anything to add outside of the conversation we had yesterday on Godwin?
I can't even spell hamstring, so I have nothing to add.
All right, that's fair. All right, let's get into some other social questions. Please keep sending them along at Fantasy Focus if you are one of our Twitter followers. And if you're watching on the YouTube stream, we love being able to get questions in chat. We try to pull them every single day if we get a chance. as long as we don't run long. Usually we only run long when Mike is on the show because he just talks so much. It's so hard to get Mike to stop talking.
Talk.
This one comes from John. Would you take Kelce at the 12th, 13th pick for a non-PPR standard league?
Is that league or is that
That's a leaf.
Leaf-u?
Yeah.
This Kelce first round tight end chat that we had, that was probably about a week or 10 days ago, generated like some significant buzz. People were upset about that. No way you're taking Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce in the first round. I said, and I think it might have been Liz who was like, she was passionate that it was okay.
I think it was Liz.
I got to check the tape. But anyways, my stance, whatever her stance was or was not, my stance was that while it's not how I would typically go about things, I understand it and I could justify it in the right circumstance. I think in a non-PPR league, you probably would lean a little bit more running back heavy in that first round. Guys like Nick Chubb would validate their first round status potentially. You've got guys that aren't going to catch 50 passes this year. But Kelce, again, the same logic I had when having it in the PPR discussion, I think could apply here. The floor for Kelce is probably somewhere around 1,000 receiving yards and probably 8 or 10 touchdowns.
I think the counterpoint is the idea that while I don't like taking a tight end that early, in a non-PPR league, I am getting one of the 3 tight ends that had over 1,000 yards receiving last year. And you know the touchdown upside that Travis Kelce has. When you're not able to bank on those catches, the guys like Cole Kmet and everybody else at those later round targets, they all of a sudden fall off real quick. So being able to take Travis Kelce, while still a little early for me, that positional scarcity because of the yards that they get in a non-PPR league, I understand it. That makes sense. Next question comes from Dylan. What wide receiver in round 7 through 9 this year can be this year's Debo?
Nobody.
How about, here's a couple of names.
Yeah, there's some good ones, though.
Yeah, no, there are good names. It's hard because when I look at Debo, I think about the style of play, and I don't really see that.
Sure, yeah. But
Production,
production.
points.
the reference here is the production points. And there are a lot of them, Daniel. But go ahead and read some of the names that are currently going in the 7th to 8th round.
7th through 9th round range is Cortland Sutton,
He would be one.
Amon-Ra St. Brown,
He would be one.
I'd take him.
Darnell Mooney,
Not quite there.
Gabe Davis,
Not quite there. But close.
Allen Robinson,
Not quite there.
Nope.
Juju,
Eh,
and Rashad Bateman.
maybe. So the 2 that come to mind for me are Amon-Ra
first
St.
two.
Brown and Cortland Sutton. Just the upside with Cortland Sutton playing in this offense with Russell Wilson. I talked about it yesterday. Super excited about him. And then Amon-Ra, no Jamison Williams for at least the first 4 games. If that turns into 10 games or 14 games, then you might get a player who's going to push for 120 catches this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the buzz on the Russell Wilson, Cortland Sutton thing is very real.
Seems real.
Very real. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I think Gabe Davis in this list it's tough because he's such a different player. I know he's got Stephon Diggs in front of him. We're all enamored with Gabe Davis's upside, but man, I'm excited to see what he's going to do this year. Maybe from me, he might be close in that
I thought
range.
you were just going to go on an Amon-Ra St. Brown
No, I'm
opportunity.
trying
Are you
so
control
hard
yourself?
to limit
Okay.
my Lions fandom.
Because I actually love him, and especially, we know Jamison Williams not going to be there to be like.
Yeah, I love TJ Hawkinson, man. I had Rosie pull up a picture of TJ Hawkinson, and that's what we did for my hair this morning, by the way.
Oh, is that how you
Literally have
styled?
never been seen in the same place as T.J. Hawkinson.
It's
Make
true.
that make sense.
That's not wrong. It's a lot of fun. Hopefully, you guys have fun with my hairstyles because life's too serious to not have fun with yourself. You know what I mean?
Listen.
So, all right. This next question comes from Alex. Do you have any advice for drafting in a Survivor League? Or would you draft the same, understanding that Survivor Leagues inherently play out different than redraft leagues?
It's a great question, Alex. Here's the reason why is because your draft strategy after week 1 could completely blow up in your face or work out great. Last year in our Survivor League that we did here at ESPN, Sma, you won that, right?
I did. Thanks for bringing that up.
yeah,
yeah.
but-
Doing that.
Remember how I won? I beat you.
Yeah, but Stefania
I
won the
beat you.
league. But Seth Waldron, who works here at ESPN Analytics, after the first week, he barely scraped by, and he spent all of his money on Zeke Elliott, who was okay, not great.
Not great.
And then Seth made a run to the finals or the semifinals. He had finished a top 3 team. So here's what I would say, Alex. My general strategy is that this is not like a survivor pool where you just sort of pick the Chiefs in week 1 because you think they're going to win. You can modify your strategy a little bit, but the modifications for me are that early on, you need to avoid more risk. Like Mike Thomas, Chris Godwin, DeAndre Hopkins, those are only last resort type picks for you because if you've got Michael Thomas as your flex in week 1 or Chris Godwin as your flex in week 1, and it turns out that Godwin can only play 20 snaps in that game and has 2 catches, then all of a sudden you could be compromised. So I tend to be a little safer early on. And really, how you win a Survivor League is not what you do in the draft. It's what you do with your money after that.
It's right. Who you pick up every week.
My team was I remember this last year. I remember it well. Like, I had a really solid first 5 weeks. Both Matthew and I were like the top 2 scoring teams through 5 weeks. And then we both got eliminated in like successive weeks after that. It was like week 6, me, week 7, him.
Were you part of that fell victim to Patrick Mahomes? Because I know our producer did.
I did not know, but like 3 straight weeks where Mahomes was the starting quarterback of the team that lost.
And so he'd be available every week because the team that's out, their players go back in the pool.
Tough.
So everybody would be like, "Oh, Patrick Mahomes." And then
what happened to me was this guy I was playing against had Cooper Kupp and Jonathan, and you know they were going to go off.
Of course.
And of course, Cooper Kupp had 8 points against me. He went off.
I love it.
I'm kidding.
All right, last question really quick.
I'm going to say one last thing. If you want to get involved in a Survivor League, go to my Twitter @FieldYates to support Kentucky flood relief.
Yes.
Cousin of mine, Griffey, he has been doing a great job to spearhead some efforts. An opportunity to play. There's going to be 144 people in total. If you want to get involved, it would go a long way because while the floods were about a month or so ago, they still need your help. There's a lot of work to do down there in the great state of Kentucky.
And if you have field blocked or muted, I also retweeted Griffey's just in case.
Gotcha.
And not to be left out, I'll do it.
Okay, in case I am muted or blocked, then you can go to
opportunity to potentially play with us in a league because it's going to be 12 divisions, 12 teams. So it should be a lot of fun.
All right, last question comes from Alex. What are your favorite ways to determine draft order? For me, Field, we're doing this right now. I think it's you have someone generate their Wu-Tang names.
Okay.
You send it to somebody else and say you list the order based on what their Wu-Tang names are.
So good. Yeah, you and I are playing in a league of Michigan men, which I'm very excited. Our buddy Al from Holmes is going to be a huge part of that. But have you guys seen the reel that's going around right now all over Instagram? It's hilarious because this might be the only other way that's better than that to determine your draft order.
Tell me.
Everybody runs a 40-yard dash.
Stop.
Fastest gets first pick, slowest gets last pick. And it was awesome. It was a group of like 10 or 15, maybe it was 16 guys. And I would say that none of them will be making it into the NFL anytime soon.
Do they do that before like food and beverage consumption, or is that done at the end of a long day?
It seemed like there might have been a couple brews consumed before then.
Before and after.
But it's a great way to determine your draft order.
They should have like a little combine.
That's
that
exactly what you do, right? You set it up, you get the the fancy stopwatch there.
Oh my
awesome.
God, how fun would
hilarious.
That would be great.
Otherwise, there's like software that you can randomly generate stuff, which it's fine. I don't think it's that exciting. I like doing something a little bit outside the box.
Yeah, have
like
some fun with it.
40-yard dash.
Agreed. Have some fun with it. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Stefan, are you back with us tomorrow?
I am.
That's amazing. Field, are you with us tomorrow too?
Yeah, I'm back.
I'm going to be back
Of course
too.
I'm back.
So it's going to be us three again. We're going to be talking the two best teams, or one of the best teams in the NFL, the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings.
What? Look at
Going to be a ton of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Where's dinner tonight? Because it's on you.
Ooh. On me?
Yeah. What contract, baby?
Yeah, you guys, I'll tell you where to show up and I'll be there, I promise.
Wow. You think about how many Miller Lights you can buy now?
So many.
I know.
Yeah.
I got a separate fridge.
You can get a pool like Mike Clay.
Just full of Miller Lights.
Yeah.
Yes.